Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
So a tech leader in New York City during COVID decides to go back to his family's roots and buy a cattle ranch in Colorado. After all, hybrid work, right? One problem. There's no wired internet on the property. In fact, there's no wires of any kind. Solution? Well, solutions. Multiple line of sight satellite providers plus Starlink, aggregated over SD-WAN. All of that work gets you to about 100 megabits per second up and down, just like in New York City. Easy, right? Not so much. It's pretty complicated stuff, actually, for one user in one remote location. So what does a company or IT executive have to do to pull this off across a multitude of users in our new hybrid work reality? My guest on this episode of the pod is Zach Grant. He's the Vice President of Solution Architecture at MetTel. And as you guessed, he's the cattle rancher. We talk about doing service aggregation and the heavy lifting necessary to support users like him in the new hybrid economy. And if we're supporting you on your hybrid journey here on The Bridge, please subscribe, like, rate us on your favorite podcast platform. But let's jump into cattle ranching, Starlink, POTS replacement, and dirty work with my new friend, Zach Grant of MetTel. Welcome to another episode of The Bridge. My guest, I'm excited about this one. My guest on the pod today is Zach Grant. He's the Vice President of Solution Architecture at MetTel. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. So let's just get it out of the way. MetTel was Metropolitan. Give me a little bit on that. You just got to describe that for everybody.
Yeah. In actual, it started out Manhattan Telecommunications, and then as we expanded, it became Metropolitan Telecommunications, and of course, our AKA doing business as is MetTel, METTEL. So we shortened it and makes it nice and quick when conveying to customers our name and our email addresses.
I get it, and you've been there for literally like a quarter of a century. I'm kidding. 14 years, something along those lines?
14 years. I started out as a customer. Yeah.
As a customer? How'd that happen?
I did. You know what? I worked for a Fortune 500 healthcare company. And on the third day, they went bankrupt, and I was shipped out to California to install some really expensive gear, and my entire team was laid off. And so I'm calling in. I have no idea who to contact. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've got about $80,000 worth of equipment. And I was not laid off because I was such a new employee that I was a part of the rift. So by the time I figured it out and I came back, I had a big plate of responsibility on me, 700 healthcare locations. And I was just kind of promoted to IT director. I was just a lonely data engineer. And I had to figure out how to invoice, how to manage, how to really take this healthcare company and keep it above water in our communications method, whether it's data, telecom, digital security. And through those pain points, I found MetTel, and I found a great partner. We did some innovative things, and I started taking calls from large organizations such as, the Children's Place, Disney, and they said, "Hey, how are you doing this?" And we built a success story on that. And eventually, after about 5-6 years, I moved over to MetTel because I was doing more for their customers than I was for my own. So it was a good natural
fit. That was 5-6 years. So we just spanned 20 years of your career history in the first 3 minutes of this podcast.
First 3 minutes. Yeah. I was just thrown into the fire pit.
All right. So now you would assume, or I would assume, I did in the pre-show that you were in New York. Where are you located today as we're having this
Today,
chat?
I'm in Salt Lake City. I'm in our divisional office in Salt Lake City, but I'm a work from home employee. I actually work out of Colorado. I have a little cattle ranch that I own and operate that I purchased after COVID.
Well, all right, we're going to explore that in a couple of minutes. Actually, let's jump into it now. Let's just do that. So you are a cattle rancher. You're a reformed uh, head of infrastructure and IT for a medical organization, then becoming a head of solutions architecture for Metropolitan or Manhattan Telecom at the beginning, now MetTel, throughout that process. And now you also can't count yourself as a cattle rancher post COVID. You got to give us a little bit of that story before we jump into the tech.
Yeah, I was in Salt Lake City. I was, about my 10th, 11th year with MetTel, and the COVID lockdowns happened. And of course, all of us scramble, right? We had to enable technology for everyone else, and at the same time enable ourselves to work from home. We traditionally are not a work from home organization, but after being locked up for such a long time, having so much restrictions, kind of as those restrictions started to lift, I said, you know what? I have the technology, I have the capabilities. I grew up in a ranching environment, so I said, my kids are struggling in school. They're not adapting to this lockdown, the masks, having individuality. So I made the decision that I wanted to try my hand going back to my roots, and so I bought a little place in southern Colorado, and I have no wired internet, no wired technology there. So I had to improvise and use all the technology that I sell and design for my customers to really enable myself. And so I get up 4 a.m. every day, and the first hour and a half are chores for the ranch, a little bit of gym time, some exercise for me. And then I start work at 9 a.m. Eastern time because the company is on the East Coast. And so I have a nice synchronized time schedule. And some of the funnest things happen. I've been on calls and had to put folks on call because I had wild dogs killing chickens outside of my front yard, and I had to go silence them, or I have cut myself and had to make a trip to the emergency room. So a lot of fun stories living the ranch life while trying to sell and architect solutions.
I occasionally have a white, fluffy, anything but wild dog making noise while I'm trying to do podcasts as well in the other room. But I don't, outside of that, I can't share your experience. But it's an interesting COVID story. All right, you got to just jump right in on that. How did you wire the ranch? Like, what are you using for connectivity at your home?
Yeah, you know what? So it all starts with SD-WAN. So what I did was I brought in a couple of line of sight providers that are in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And line of sight is great. It works really well, but obviously it has some detriments when there's bad weather or different type of ailments in the environment. So what I did is I kind of brought in tertiary using Starlink, and so I'm a
Okay.
consumer of Starlink, and those three individual services aggregated together give me over 100 meg up and down of really good internet and VPN access back to my corporate office. So working from home is seamless for me.
All right, we're gonna explore that in a little bit. That's, I guess, a case study for MetTel at the end of the day. But so but let's do that for a minute.
Yeah.
As you know on this, and we've talked about this, you've also been a follower of the pod, so I appreciate that. By the way, thank you. Um,
Yeah.
and for those of you who are not and listening to this right now, hey, let's get a follow, please, and a thumbs up and a 5-star. Um, but as it relates to MetTel, as you know on the pod, we give everybody an opportunity to just quickly give us, so they know who you are. Give us the pitch. What is it that's unique about the company? What's the superpower? Just lay that out for
Yeah.
us.
Absolutely. MetTel has a very vast library of products and services, and in no way are we trying to be everything for everyone. But what you'll find with MetTel is we have a very centric belief in data management. And our belief is if you cannot measure it, if you cannot monitor it, you can't manage it. And so when you look at the entire technology stack, whether it's digital security, SD-WAN for routing, mobility, there's a lot of analytics that live in each one of those products. And for us, what we do is we bring a centric model around the management of each of those so that customers can focus on what they do on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of what we do is normalize that experience. We have customer engineers that are like, hey, I need X amount of bandwidth, and it has to be this technology, it has to be this path, it has to be this latency. And what we try to do is normalize that and get rid of that experience, say this is now a consumable product. Let us do the engineering. You just tell us what you need, and let our array of engineers bring together a very simple solution that you can plug into and take a plug and play type um, aspect to it. And then we give you monitoring and analytic tools so that you can look at the SLAs, you can look at the flow, you can look at all the attributes around that service to know you're getting what you pay for. And so MetTel is very unique in that there's a full library. We would spend hours and hours going through that library, but it really all comes down to inventory management and monitoring of all the elements of what we offer our customers, giving them a single screen and a single ecosystem to manage their company assets.
So help us. I'm going to read that back in a minute, but help us just
Okay.
categorize the assets that you are selling them. Like put them in categories. I mean, you mentioned connectivity of various
Yeah.
types. You obviously mentioned SD-WAN and SASE services. You guys are also in telecom. Can you just give us the top? I mean, there's a million
Yeah,
products, but just give us
absolutely.
the top level
So let's
level
let's
categories.
start with connectivity.
Yeah.
Access. Who are you consuming access from? So in our portfolio, we have over 120 carriers that we have wholesale relationships with. So oftentimes when a customer comes to us and says, "Well, what is your footprint?" Well, that's a loaded question because I can give you service anywhere on the globe, wherever their service is today. So for us, our model is really about wholesale relationships and being able to aggregate those services onto one bill, one project management experience, one billing experience, and one repair experience. So for us, we're that single point of contact for access. That could be mobility, it could be wired fiber, Ethernet, it could be Starlink satellite services. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, we treat it all the same. Obviously, from an engineering perspective, we use different technologies to meet the goals and the business criteria. But for our end users, it's a global footprint of all
Okay.
services that they can consume. Then it needs to be terminated on something. We have to care for security. So we're a really big organization around SD-WAN and security. And there's some conflicts there that I'd like to talk to you and your audience about SASE versus SD-WAN. SD-WAN 5, 10 years ago, that was the big buzzword and everybody was moving to it. But as the security model changed and the wanting to get to the internet or your resources as fast as possible, that breaks the SD-WAN model. And so there's a lot of things or items that marketing material or
Yeah.
marketing companies will just kind of wipe over that's not real understandable in the details of the engineering. And so that's what MetTel does is we really sit down with our customers, understand what they're doing, and
Yeah.
say, okay, this SD-WAN flavor is not a good fit for you. We're not saying it's bad technology. We're just saying it's not a good fit because of X, Y, Z. So we
Yeah.
really get into the nuggets and deep dive with our customers.
Okay. Um, Help me. Let's expand on that a little bit because we talked a little bit in the pre-show about how your business has changed and your approach to customers has changed in the pandemic, right? And I think part of
Hmm.
the conversation that you just laid out was sort of SD-WAN and SASE are in some cases a little bit at odds with each other, even though in a lot of ways they leverage
Yeah,
some of the same kind of underpinnings, right? Um, I'd like you
yeah.
to read that back a little bit, but I'll ask it to you in the context of, um, are they different in that our footprint has changed, right? Where, I look at it like SD-WAN is a way to wire offices and SASE is a way to wire endpoints, right? But they still get everybody on the same
Yeah,
network. But I think the way we think about our networks has changed. Fair way for me to think about it,
absolutely.
or were you thinking about it a different way in comparing those two
Well,
technologies?
you know what? Let me give you an analogy. Let's go
Yeah.
back a couple years in the wireless world, right? Your AT&Ts, your T-Mobiles, and Verizons. Back in the day, when you would get a cell phone and you would go to the internet, if you actually watched where your traffic went to, it went to the central point in the United States. Most carriers dropped all their traffic off in Kansas City. So you can be in California, but to get to the internet, your traffic
Yeah.
had to get to Kansas City first, and then it went out to the world. The wireless companies looked at that and said, you know what, that's inefficient. Let's put gateways in California, on the East Coast, in the Central. And then all of a sudden, our cellular experience became faster because we were able to get to our data faster. So in many ways, security was the same way. We used to have centralized security stacks where you had to go to a centralized point, get that security stack, and then go out to the internet. But as we started to try to optimize and make our applications faster, we realized that SASE was an amazing model because you can take that centralized security stack and move it to the endpoints, and
Mhm.
now you can egress out to the internet immediately. The problem is is where SD-WAN used to play. Is SD-WAN is a point-to-point technology,
Yep.
meaning SD-WAN will let you aggregate bandwidth. So if you have multiple 10 meg circuits and you run a speed test, you'd get 20 meg out of that, right? But since SD-WAN is a point-to-point technology, and all of our applications are now being served from the internet. And what I mean by that is Teams, Zoom, YouTube, Netflix. There's no SD-WAN endpoint on the internet for you to optimize that traffic, for you to aggregate your bandwidth. So what happens is SASE, and security is always priority, SASE, moving all that security to the endpoints, allows you to get to the internet quicker. But what it does is it breaks all that optimization that we've been designing for years. So MetTel's taken a hybrid approach and said, listen, we have a hybrid SD-WAN and SASE model that says, take all these SD-WAN gateways and distribute them just like the wireless carriers did to their internet gateways, distribute as vast as you can so that as customers go to the internet, they're still using the SD-WAN technology. So when I go to Netflix, when I go to a speed test, when I go
Yeah.
to Teams, my critical traffic that I'm now consuming from the internet is still protected with SD-WAN. I have jitter buffers. I have packet duplication. I have multi-path brownout, path resolution. And so for us, it's all about improving the experience while maintaining the security. We've taken the SD-WAN model, we've taken the SASE model, and we haven't deployed it like our peers. We've made a hybrid of both so that you get the best of both worlds.
Got
Best
it.
way I can
And
explain it.
no, I get it. Let me compact it a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind. I
Yeah,
think again, I think we actually maybe said the same thing slightly different ways. The reality of it was in, call it March, April, May of 2020, right? And as Bridgepoint is the technology advisory firm. We have partnerships with companies like yourselves to distribute on behalf of our customers, helping them solve business outcomes with technology. So, what was the problem they were trying to solve in March, April, May 2020 is we sold more bandwidth to get people from their houses back to the office, only to get back out to the internet, right?
right.
In those 3 months, than, probably any other period in our history. And while it was great for us to deal with the access problem and to help those customers, the reality of it is we were throwing good bandwidth at the wrong problem at the end of the day. And that's
Right.
really what you're talking about, which is,
Absolutely.
historically, we build an edge to a company's network where there were two main assumptions, right? One was that the majority of the assets that I were getting to were in my headquarters, right? And as a result, two, I could build my security edge there, meaning my path to the internet was through headquarters, right?
Right.
The reality of it is the headquarters is no longer the center of the application universe in nearly every business that's out there, right? There's no reason to get back to headquarters, if you will, logically over the network. And two, everything that we're getting to, right, is out on the internet. So why backhaul it to get back out? So your point then is, what you're saying is, you've taken the SASE model, you push that out to the edge. Obviously, that's the general point behind SASE, is to take that centralized security posture, push it out to the edge, regardless of where the end user is, what have you. But you've combined it with the SD-WAN. So if they are compiling, like in your case, I love how this keeps coming back to the ranch somehow. You're combining multiple access mediums to get that SD-WAN combo, right, if you will,
Right.
of available access. But the security is at your edge. Care to share a little bit about how you're accomplishing that? When you say combine them, is it a unique MetTel device that you're putting in there? Is it a unique combination of technologies that we might be aware of? Tell us how, beat that back a little bit.
Yeah,
There's a little bit more detail there.
no, you know what we leverage. So we're a big VMware VeloCloud technology, but
Okay.
obviously there's a couple of good SD-WAN technology algorithms out there, and so we're not going to single thread ourselves to one platform, but really it's the underlying network and how we've put our gateways distributed throughout the globe, really. So that, and keep in mind, I want to make sure we don't miss this one point. When we all went home to work from COVID, we went from business class access to consumer grade access,
Mm-hmm.
and that really was a driver for us to use SD-WAN. But again, we were still accessing those centralized applications, and then over the last couple of years, we're seeing that push for it to go out to the internet. So now we're using consumer grade bandwidth to business applications that are out on the internet cloud, the public cloud, and we have no control of that consumer grade access. So that's where our technology comes in that says, you know what, we'll put a device at your home, we'll put software on your cell phones, we'll put software
Yeah.
on your devices. Not only is it going to secure you, what it's going to do is it's going to optimize your traffic because I'm going to put you through strategic gateways before you get to the internet, so that last mile access is protected, and we're giving you business class experience over that consumer grade broadband that you, the home users in charge of, that you or I as IT professionals have no control over, regardless of preferred carriers. You go to North Dakota, you go to New Mexico, there are hundreds of different carriers that are providing services, all with different protocols, strategies, modems. And so for us, we had to normalize all of that. We had to get rid of that minutia, encapsulate everything into a business strategy. And that's what we did. And that's why, our methodology was so popular with our customers throughout the COVID pandemic, because they didn't miss a beat,
Yeah.
right? So,
So in a lot of ways, then what you're saying is your business as let's say a portion of your business was, historically in network aggregation, right? I'm going
right.
to go bring in the right provider to get access to the address where your offices happen to be, right?
Yeah.
Um, are you now solving the same network access problem for end users? Like I get pushing the SASE service out there to say, I'm going to optimize the access that you end consumer can get at home. Um,
Yeah.
but are you being brought in also to solve problems, sort of end user access problems for businesses because they have to get to a certain employee, or talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, we are. We're not doing it in the sense of, we're not trying to sell access into residential homes.
Okay.
What we're doing is saying, you already have something for your entertainment. You already have home internet.
Yeah.
It's consumer grade. What we want to do is we want to put the security on top of your work devices to make sure that there's segregation there. We want to make sure that we give you an optimized path back to your business apps and just over to the general internet. Because again, right? Zoom, Teams, these are all critical real-time communications that we all have to use now to collaborate. And so for us, it's about optimizing everything over the wire without caring who's providing the wire and what that wire is or that wireless is. So
Yep.
for us, it was taking that out, the complications out, and making it very simple for our customers.
Super cool. I'm going to segue for a minute, if you would. Because there's been a handful, all this technology is moving. It's come and it's changed over COVID. There's been all this, kind of hybrid work motion in the way that we operate today. But many businesses still lean on some traditional technologies out there. And one of the ones that we talked a little bit about in the pre-show um, was traditional POS lines, which still live inside of businesses for a whole
Mhm.
host of reasons, right? To open the front door, to supporting the elevator lines and faxes and, legacy credit card machines. God forbid some of them be out there. Like that's still out there. And I'm, I don't know that they were necessarily timed together, but let's just say this move to home made it a whole lot easier for the FCCs to give the Lex an out on continuing to maintain the copper network because all of this technology had to move so quickly.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about POTS, POTS replacement, POTS in a box. Can you just speak to why all of a sudden that's important?
Absolutely. So if you look at the history of telecom since the early 1900s, we put copper infrastructure in the ground, and we're using the same copper infrastructure today. So when it comes to things like service level agreements or repairs, I've seen instances where a repair can take months, right? There's no longer SLAs. Yet we're still dependent on it for business communications, whether it's alarm line, elevator, 911 calls. So for us, the FCC put a challenge to all the carriers that says, get rid of that infrastructure. But at the same time, you still had businesses that invested millions of dollars that they have not depreciated in their different infrastructure. So what the POTS replacement really is, it's an appliance that takes digital signaling, fiber, 5G, 4G, um, coax, right? And then it translates it back to the old analog signaling, so we can put those same traditional lines in your PBX. You can put those in your elevator, and then there's things like battery backup, so that if the entire facility loses power, just like in the old days that the central
Hmm.
office would provide DC power to the line, same concept. You have that business resilience, you have that disaster recovery, and then we're able to really modularize and say, hey, you know what? Let's put your data network through this as well. Let us give you some redundancy here. Let's make sure your 911 calls go to the right PSAP. So it really is an appliance that's allowing these companies to get off of pots, get better visibility, management, service level access, and not be dependent on that old copper that we just cannot service anymore in this industry.
Yeah, so it fits in a lot with the strategy we were just talking about around SD-WAN and SASE. I mean, at the end of the day, you're basically saying the business is
Absolutely.
wired up multiple ways based on what's available in that location. You guys are providing devices and management to make it intelligent to be able to deal with the multiple applications that are out there, whether it's, you know, handing off a POTS line to an elevator or optimizing traffic to Teams, right, for an end user, whatever that
That's right.
happens to be, sort of fits in with the methodology. I do want to just clarify one thing from a make sure that everybody's on the same page. One, I don't think most people realize what you said about copper and the
Okay.
fact that, you know, the copper that some of the access that we have running over right now has literally been in the ground or over a pole. You deal with it in New York City all the time, right?
Yeah.
For 100 years. I mean, and it hasn't
Absolutely.
changed. The endpoints have changed. The way we terminated changes, but it's the same copper.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same copper, and a lot of times what we see is repairing one customer will break another customer, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not enough facilities, and we're not putting new copper in the ground. So it really is a race to get everyone off of this copper, and it's critical, especially when you look in the medical field. How many devices, how many appliances still
Wow.
rely on that copper type signaling? We have to maintain that. So for us, it was a strategy that we came up with that allows us to rapidly convert our customers, and again, not make them invest the millions of dollars to replace everything inside their infrastructure. It's a translation, and
Yeah.
we deploy it rapidly. We are able to, we have a use case where we had a customer that had 3,000 locations, and we had 4 hours of work that we had to accomplish per location.
Yeah.
And so this box really allowed us to get out there and do it in under an hour, and convert 3,000 locations in just a few months. With a lot of constraints that the company had just due to security and different issues in their ecosystem. So for us, we're really happy with this technology, and it's really proven to save a lot of money. And when I say money, understand there's some places in Texas that if you order a traditional business analog line,
Yeah.
that'll cost you about $800 a month. Where now we're bringing it
Yeah.
back
I mean,
down
what
to
was that?
$32 a month.
What was that a year ago? That line.
Oh, it was probably 600 a year ago, and before that it was 400. It literally are taking jumps of hundreds of dollars for a single line, and so you
Yeah.
have these companies that they have no control of it, and they're now being charged thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per location just because they're on old infrastructure. So it's a advantageous technology, not
So
the
the
not the funnest to talk about,
no, but
but
I
it's
mean,
very important.
I think it leans into the story that we're talking about here, right? So the secret
Absolutely.
sauce for you guys really is the customers got have POTS lines in there, they've got cable circuits in there, they've got areas where they can't get access, really well. I mean, the bottom line on all this is where you guys are winning is in finding the opportunity to really make all of that intelligent. Don't go buy six different things. Engage you guys, figure out what you can bring into the location, whether that's replacing a piece of 100-year-old copper or driving a Starlink connection,
Absolutely.
directly into a location. You guys are kind of bridging the gap across all that. Is that strategy different, changed, expanded, amended in any way since the pandemic in your mind? Or has that really always been in your DNA and the opportunities just gotten broader as a result of work from home?
I would say the opportunity's gotten broader. It's always
Yeah.
been in our DNA. It's something that we obviously offered pre-pandemic. I just
Hmm.
don't think the market recognized the urgency
Okay.
until the ILEC carriers started to have to start shutting off um, the copper plants. I literally have hospitals that called us and said, "Hey, we've got 25 days, and it's going to get shut off." Or I've had 911 centers call us and say, "Hey, we're shut down. No one can make 911 calls. We have to get
Wow.
something replaced." And so there's been a lot of pressure from the FCC and the carriers to get customers to evacuate this technology, this old technology, and they're doing it right now through price motivation. $800 a line, you don't want to stay on that forever,
Well,
and that's
exactly.
what we're seeing. And the
Yeah.
pandemic just kind of made it worse. It drove it home.
Is education and municipal an interesting vertical for you guys as a result? I would imagine that those are places where
It is.
more of this legacy infrastructure sits. Can you speak to that?
It absolutely does. And so when you look at a lot of the infrastructure of just government buildings in general, whether it's a municipality in a school or a government building, when those buildings were built, they were not built to have coax go inside. They were not built to have fiber, but they were absolutely built to have copper. Right. And
Yeah.
so you really come down to this dynamic where we're trying to rebuild and put in new infrastructure in old construction. And so new schools, new municipalities that have new facilities, it's a lot easier. But that's not where the majority, right? 95% of that infrastructure sits on 100-year-old aged buildings. And so it is interesting. And of course, our most critical assets sit in those buildings, whether it's your children or their healthcare facilities or
Yeah.
our money, right? Those are the three things. And so when a 911 call comes across, you can't get it wrong, right? You have to make sure that 911 call makes it. And so for us, it's balancing getting it deployed quickly, but at the same time caring for the criticality of what we're trying to convert.
Yep. Well, we talked about a lot of wires, man, in this session of all kinds, which I appreciate. And I think doing that sort of dictates where your superpower is, and playing and unraveling all that stuff and letting the customer focus on their business. I have one last question before we jump into a little bit of fun. And, you
Yeah.
mentioned, the company started as Manhattan Telecom, right? And I think, people think about New York, they think about people going into an office every day, and that's the business legacy, right, of MetTel. Where are you guys on the spectrum of work from home with your
Yeah.
own team?
Yeah. So obviously for COVID, we adapted work from home, and 90% of
Yeah.
the staff work from home.
Hmm.
But that was forced. Our CEO, Marshall Arono, he's an old stock market guy, right? He was a
Yeah.
trader, and so
Yeah.
he's a mover. He's a hustler. He loves the in-person collaboration, and I'm a work from home employee, so I empathize with those of us that like to work from home. But I absolutely see the dynamic of where I'm losing continuity because I'm not part of the day-to-day conversations that are happening in the office, and they make a lot of decisions. It's very much controlled chaos. When they want to focus on a project, they want to focus on it now. They want to pull in the players that they have now.
Yeah.
And so it's a balance. I love working from home because I'm not disturbed. I'm not interrupt driven like I am when I work out of an office. But at the same time, that interrupt driven really drives home me being in the know, what projects, what's going on. So
So you guys are
I think
hybrid,
MetTel is
truly
better
hybrid.
served as a truly hybrid. And I
Yeah.
do have to say, I think the better experience is when we are in the office. I think more collaboration gets done, maybe less work gets done, but definitely more thought sharing, thought process, brainstorming happens in the office.
Interesting. Okay. So we're going to wrap it. I'm going to rapid fire three things at you. 5 minutes left. We'll see if you
All
can
right,
squeeze all
I'm
this in. We're
ready.
going to have a little bit of fun. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. I need a shameless prediction of any kind, technology,
Ooh.
sports, politics, whatever, next 12 to 18 months.
All right, you're going to hate me for this, but I believe that we're in for an economy downturn. I think that the downturn is going to be
Okay.
focused around cryptocurrency, our phases of automation, AI. Big fan of AI, but at the same time, I see the downside of AI and interest rates. So for me, I think everybody needs to start to prepare. Have your supplies at home. Have your cash reserves ready. I think it's going to be a little 2008 repeat tumultuous time, and I think in the next 18 months is pretty reasonable.
Okay. We could read out on that one for quite a while, but I think that's probably the topic of another podcast. All right. Two way more fun ones.
Okay.
This one's pretty simple. Give us do you have a business book or, you know, tome of some kind you're currently reading that you'd recommend to our
Oh,
listeners?
yeah. Anybody. So for me, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink is an amazing book. Basically, the premise is simple. You've got a group of Navy SEALs. They were trained, And then that training, they discuss how that training applied in the battlefield. But then they take it a step further. They're now business consultants, so they talk about how that training applies in the business world, and it's really around extreme ownership, meaning you're not doing everyone else's job. Don't misinterpret that. It's really, how do you communicate? How do you take ownership of your daily tasks to make sure that what you do in your daily mission is successful, and that you're making sure that others are adapting to your methodology for that success. So Extreme Ownership, amazing book. I can't recommend it enough. In fact, I make my entire team, new employees, older, that is a requirement to join my team.
Okay, I like it.
You have to
I'm going to download that on the iPad this afternoon. All right, last one. Here's the fun one. We had our pandemic. Let's just assume the next dystopian event occurs. Maybe this one's more dramatic, the zombie apocalypse or something. Thankfully, people will have their cash reserves if they follow your advice. But what would the one app that's still working on your phone be if you had your choice? One application still working.
That's really tough. And my daughters they always give me gruff for being the old guy, old school, but I'm a Facebook guy.
Okay.
I think through Facebook, you can continue to communicate. You can continue to, I have friends on Facebook. I haven't talked to them in person for 30 years, but I feel like I still know them because I see their family photos. I see their kids. I see how much their kids look like them when I was in high school. And I think it's just a good way to keep that community together and communicate and know how your peers are doing without necessarily that face-to-face or phone call interaction. So I'm going to say, let me keep my Facebook in the apocalypse.
Got it. And you'll be sure to immediately then join the Salt Lake Survivors Facebook group at that point. So you'll know who else is a beating heart out there, which is good.
That's right.
I appreciate that.
That's right.
Zach, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate your time today. For people who are interested outside of getting a hold of your friendly neighborhood Bridgepoint strategist, how should they find out a little bit more about MetTel?
The best place, just go to our website, www.mettel, that's METTEL.net. I cannot say .net enough. There's another very, very small company that's the .com.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, we'll do that. Zach, I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate everybody and all of our listeners for hanging with us today. Great session, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks, guys. You take care. It was nice talking with you.
Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.